All right, Sam, you're the man of the hour. You get to take the
All
next
right,
one too for the Scrub and SnapTrim IO prioritization. Have fun.
continuing with our theme of stuff we talked about last summit but didn't get to in Giant, Scrub and SnapTrim IO prioritization. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the OSD internals, pretty much everything the OSD does is sits on a thread pool somewhere. We have a lot of them. This is usually fine, but it means that the relative priority of things that live in different thread pools is actually determined by whatever order the operating system happens to run the threads in, which isn't really the right idea. Even if you put them, I mean, we can attach different work queues to the same thread pool, but then you just get a first come, whichever process is cramming more stuff into the queue runs more, which is also not optimal. The op work queue in the OSD actually has had prioritization since I forget when, so that we could prioritize recovery I/O versus client I/O, which helped some. The proposal is basically to take everything else that could possibly take I/O and cram it into that same queue. The good news is, since Firefly, that queue is much more efficient and is sharded and does a better job of sharding itself across threads and is much better lock contention wise. So it's an even better idea now than it was before.
Hmm. So this is
Go ahead.
This is Scrub. It's snap trimming recovery.
Yeah, recovery also. Right now, primary recovery isn't really throttled versus everything else. There's a recovery thread pool, and it gets 2 threads versus however many threads client I/O gets.
Yeah, that doesn't
It's
actually do any
implicitly.
I/O. It's just.
It does actually. It'll do reads on in order to do pushes.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll also do backfill scans. So yeah, it's non-trivial, or it's not completely lightweight. This is very conceptually simple. It's mostly just a matter of the thing we enqueue in the op work queue needs to grow to be a big ugly sum type with everything we could possibly want to put in that queue, and everything else needs to be rejiggered slightly to use that queue instead of whatever queue they were using before.
Okay. Has this started at all yet?
Yeah, I started a branch a couple of months ago, but then the stuff changing the thread pool went in, so it's probably not rebasable. I actually think I will get to it in the next month or so.
Is this using like a boost variant or something for the?
Actually, it occurred to me that I probably can't do that because there's an indirection in boost variant, which we probably can't afford. So probably old school tagged union. I need to check boost variant to make sure, but I think boost variant is a polymorphic type and requires vtable indirection.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, we just want like a typed pointer, right? Because everything
what we need is a struct with 2 fields. One is a
type,
a type, an int type, and the other is a void star that we cast. Right. We can do very marginally better by using a union instead, and that's probably fine.
Yeah. Okay. If I'm remembering correctly, one of the issues that we had with when we were doing the prioritization for recovery that we didn't solve was that we aren't taking into consideration the workload on the replicas. So
actually, we kind of do. Recovery will only allow per PG recovery will only allow a certain number of outstanding IOs or recovery IOs to the replicas. So if they're just tardy in returning them, it throttles.
But
which they will be because we mark the messages with a priority.
But they have to be ordered
only with respect to other recovery messages.
Okay.
Actually, only with respect to other priority messages of the same priority. In general, no, actually, they don't have to be ordered at all.
So if you're doing log recovery, but you're also servicing writes, the writes can pass the pushes.
Yes, unless, except for one fairly large problem, which is that if you start log-based recovery on an object, or for that matter, backfill on an object at a low priority, there's no way to elevate the priority when a write comes in on that object.
Sent. Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, but we're probably going to leave that one for the time being.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. One thing that we'll lose here that was possibly not a good idea anyway was that we added IO priority tagging to the background work queues so that the IOs that actually go down to the low level were tagged. This is basically pushing all of that priority queuing up into our layer. So we're basically assuming that once we dispatch it, then we want to complete as quickly as possible. It's only
which is true when you're holding a PG log, actually.
Yeah.
Anything that increases
things in our queue. Yeah.
Well, I would argue that actually with all of those things, the time you spend at the lower priority is strictly worse than spending it at high priority because you're delaying anything else that needs the PG lock during that time.
Yep.
So the correct answer is to break those operations into smaller granularity. So if we want to make scrub better behaved or snap trimming better behaved, for example, when we send the scrub message, we should do it a few objects at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when we're generating the scrub interval, for example, we can do like 5 at a time until we get to whatever the primary asked for, and then send it back. Assuming, of course, that we can make the ordering work out, which I think is moderately difficult, but not hugely. Because I think the primary pauses IO on that whole region, so I think it should be fine.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Actually, there's one place where it might matter. If different pools had different priorities relative to each other, then it might make sense whenever a thread picks up work for a low priority pool, it would make sense to reduce the priority of that thread while it's running. That may make some limited amount of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It probably makes more sense, however, to just lower the priority with which we put the items into the queue.
Yeah, I mean,
if sitting on the resource.
If we decide that we're going to do the prioritization scheduling in this queue, then anything below it, we just want to be as fast as possible.
Yep. I think that is correct.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to cover here?
Nope, that one's pretty straightforward.
That one's easy. All right.
Oh, that was short.
I guess there's no lag, so if there aren't any questions, there aren't any questions. That's nice.
Yeah. All right, you want to bust right on through the next one then?
Yes. Well, the next one is how am I here?
The next one's the update in transaction encoding, which was yours again, but
yeah. I believe How I said he was going to join though. He sent an email earlier. He's not here.